All right, from football to football, 14 days from now, the Atlanta Falcons will be on the clock at number 4 at the NFL Draft. That front office has a decision to make. With Matt Ryan still in play for next season, do they go find his protege or go another route? Well, let's just play the QB role for a little bit. Justin Fields just wrapped up his second pro day. Falcons were one of several teams there. Trey Lance is the name that's been buzzing as well as one of those top 6 QBs that can come off the board the first round. Could he be a target in the ATL for the future? We'll have to see. So when it comes to drafting in the top 5, the Falcons have had some success in finding those pieces. Matt Ryan, the obvious one, leading them to that Super Bowl 53. Didn't win it, but he was the #1 overall pick in 2008. Then before that, Michael Vick. Remember the V7 experiment there, the wheels and arm that Vick showed back in 2001 for a very long time. And others, you can't forget about Prime as well. So, in other words, ATL's had some success when it comes to the first round. Speaking of success, let's welcome in 1/3 of the Pick 6 podcast, Ryan Wilson, also a.k.a. Swag Wilson, as I like to call him. R-Dub, the ATL checking in at number 4. Had a chance to check out Fields for a second time yesterday. They're still high on Trey Lance. Which one of these two may make it to Atlanta?
Well, they're picking at 4, Brandon, as you noted there. I like Justin Fields a little better, only because he's played against better competition over the course of his career. We talk about Trey Lance with all the physical tools, the arm strength, the ability to run, but he has 17 starts against FCS opponents, and that's the concern, if you want to call it that. There's a lot of reasons to love Trey Lance. He was in charge of the protections pre-snap at North Dakota State. They put a lot of responsibility, the coaches did, on him, and he took it on with no issues. But in terms of playing the top-level talent, playing against the guys who are going to be in the NFL competing as well, Justin Fields is the right pick here if you're going in that direction. Now, here's where things get interesting, Brandon. And again, I love Justin Fields. I can't reiterate that enough. He is a top 5 talent in my mind. But if Arthur Blanks, the owner, wants to roll with Matt Ryan, who has 2 more years left in his deal, that could complicate things as in terms of going in the direction of a quarterback here at 4. Arthur Smith reportedly is on the Matt Ryan train. Terry Fontenot, the new GM, reportedly is interested in kicking the tires on possibility taking him for quarterback at number 4 here. The thinking, of course, is we don't plan on picking this high routinely. If there's a quarterback we love and our current quarterback is 36 years old, maybe we target that new quarterback for the future. But we'll see how this unfolds. But I'm starting to believe, Brandon, that maybe at 4, the Falcons are going to come off this quarterback and go in another direction. We'll see what happens 2 weeks away, as you just said. But right now, if you're telling me which quarterback they should take, I would lean towards Justin Fields. You mentioned a possible another direction. What about Kyle Pitts from Florida? If you want to help your quarterback kind of prolong that season and years on in, how about a Kyle Pitts? You add a target there from Florida. Yeah, slam dunk. In fact, slam dunk no matter where you're picking. I've been saying this for weeks now. Last year, Chase Young felt like the slam dunk pick to make where you can't miss. That's the pick you make if you're a general manager and you're worried about losing your job. Take Chase Young. This year's Chase Young is Kyle Pitts. You are not going to miss if you draft Kyle Pitts, and you sort of touched on it. Why not add another element to this offense in Atlanta if you're rolling with Matt Ryan? Get him another playmaker to go along with Julio Jones and Amari Cooper, and you might say, hey, man, they have Hayden Hurst. They traded for last year. They don't need a tight end. First of all, Kyle Pitts isn't, quote-unquote, a tight end. He can play anywhere. He can play edge rusher, I'd imagine, if you want him to. Second of all, Hayden Hurst only has 1 year left on his deal, and we saw the success that Tony Gonzalez had in Atlanta when he arrived there, he and Matt Ryan. You could have similar success with Kyle Pitts, creating all sorts of havoc in the middle of the field for that Atlanta Falcons offense. All right, outside of that, maybe you just want to protect them. You got a chance to get a Penei Sewell there, number 4. Is that an option where you can kind of go up front with it? You know, a guy that's probably going to play for the next 10, 12 years here? Yeah, 100%, Brandon. So I think right now, if I'm grading the possibilities of what happens, I think stay at number 4, get Kyle Pitts. Number 2, trade down if you're not going to get a quarterback. And number 3, you take someone like Penei Sewell here because he is a plug-and-play player. And you might say, hey, man, 2 years ago they drafted 2 offensive linemen in the first round. Well, they need to keep drafting them because my lasting image of Matt Ryan the last few years is him picking himself off the turf because he's taking hit after hit after hit. They have Jake Matthews on the left side. They have Caleb McGarry and Chris Lindstrom, the 2 first-round picks I just mentioned. There's room for one more stud on that offensive line. That stud could be Penei Sewell to protect Matt Ryan as he goes down the final 2 years here in his deal in Atlanta. Outside of the offensive side, of course, the Falcons have a lot of holes that they can fill beyond that number 4 pick. If we're looking on the defensive side, the secondary and in the trenches, who are some guys that you have in your mock that they need to kind of land come draft day? Yeah, so this week's two-round mock draft, I had them focusing on, at the top, Justin Fields. We'll see if that changes next week's mock draft, which is a seven-rounder for some reason. We'll see how that unfolds. But what else do I have going on in the second round? Asante Samuel Jr., if the name doesn't give it away, that's Asante Samuel's son, and he is just as good a football player. He said he reminds himself the way he plays with Jair Alexander, just because he's slightly undersized at 5'10", and that's exactly how he plays. He plays much bigger than his size. Absolute ball hawk. You see it here. Physical at the catch point. He's a second-round pick all day long and has a chance to sneak into the first round. I think he was on our guy Pete Prisco's better than team because he has been really, really good. You see Andre Cisco there, the safety out of Syracuse to the third round. Long, physical cornerback, safety, who can play center field. He can play a little closer to the line of scrimmage. And as long as we're continuing to upgrade the offensive line, I have them taking Ben Cleveland on day 3, the huge, hulking interior offensive lineman for Georgia, who's coming off a really good season for the Bulldogs.
Yeah, a lot of people saying Asante Samuel Jr., if he was maybe 6'1", 6'2", he may be one of those top 3 corners in this year's draft. Ron, we've been going through your top 150 throughout the week. We're now in 60 and up. When you look at some of these guys, this is where you kind of find those hidden gems. How much a gap, though, when you look at some of these guys compared to the top tier, how much of a gap is it?
It's not a lot. And when you get into the second round, if you're an NFL team, you are looking for starters. And you're going to find some starters here once you get into round 2. Some of the names that I wanted to mention, at 45, I had Pat Freiermuth, the tight end out of Penn State. That guy's a starter. He feels like someone who could end up going to a team like Jacksonville early in the second round. They're going to take Trevor Lawrence. They're going to surround him with playmakers. Freiermuth at the top of the second makes sense because they also need help at tight end. Another name to keep an eye on, Rashad Bateman. Fantastic 2019 season at Minnesota as a wide receiver. 2020 was up and down. He battled COVID earlier in the summer, so that had some effect on his play. But he feels like, again, a top of the second round guy. Last week I had him going to the Bengals. So the Bengals get an offensive lineman in round 1. And Penei Sewell, they circle back and get Rashad Bateman to give Joe Burrow another weapon. And another name I'll mention, Terrace Marshall. I have him going. He's my number 57 guy on my big board, going as a mid-second round pick. He makes a lot of sense for a team like the Ravens. The Ravens get an edge rush help in the first round. They need a deep threat, a legitimate, tall, big target down the field. Miles Boykins hasn't quite worked out in that regard. Hollywood Brown is a smaller receiver that can do things at 3 levels. Terrace Marshall can burn you down the field all day long. We saw him do that 2 years ago for LSU alongside Jamar Chase and, of course, Justin Jefferson. All
right, Ryan Wilson tapping into the top 150 as well as the ATO at number 4. Appreciate your time as always this morning on HQ, my friend. Don't forget the conversation continues in the Pick 6 podcast, as well as Ryan's conversation as we do the deep dive in 5. We've went through the top 4. Well, we got something for you tomorrow as well, but download and also give the guys a follow to hear that conversation the closer we get to the NFL draft.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.